Welcome to Literary Gumbo, a continuing look at the world of writers, writing, publishing, and all other peripheral events. I'm Fred Klein, I'm the chief stirrer, and my guest is a whirlwind who just happened to stop by on her many appearances once again on her newest book, my friend Betsy Green. Welcome, Betsy.
Well, thank you, Fred. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you back and sitting down. I just think that you cover this town better than anybody I know. You do speaking engagements. I think you would do it if you could find two people who had. How do you get the stamina to do all of this all the time?
Well, I love what I do. I think that's what's keeping me going.
And you come from would you sort of a quick look at your background? I know that you've had a lot of writing. Interviewing background. Tell me.
Well, I started out as a magazine editor. I was living in Hong Kong, and I worked for a couple of magazines, including Reader's Digest, the English language Asian edition of Reader's Digest. And then when I moved to Chicago, I was an editor at World Book Encyclopedia, and then I went freelance, and I've been pretty much freelancing and writing articles and books ever since then.
Well, how long have you lived in Santa Barbara, though?
In Santa Barbara, only about 8.5 years.
Oh, so it is.
Yeah.
So you really, boy,
right.
What an impact you've made for just 8.5 years.
Well, Fred, I think I've spent more time in the libraries here than most people who've lived here far longer.
Well, it's research. Obviously, the books you do, I mean, research is sort of the key to it all. Betsy, if you didn't know, has written a number of books prior to the one we're talking about now. You've done stuff on. Tell me some of the prior books that you did before you came to Santa Barbara, even.
Oh, yeah, I wrote 2 books in Chicago. One was a history of the town where I lived in the Chicago suburbs. The other one was based on a business that I had, researching the history of older homes.
That was it.
And
Older
that one
homes,
is called,
which is the key. Yes.
Right. And that one is called Discovering the History of Your House and Your Neighborhood. And in a way, discovering the history of your house is discovering the history of your neighborhood, your town, and everything else, and everyday life at the time.
Well, where's that book now? I mean, does it apply? I mean, what you have, does it apply to various kinds of cities, or only specific cities? Or
no,
what?
it pretty much covers the United States.
Is it still available?
Yes, it is.
It's a good idea.
It's printed by Santa Monica Press, and I think it's in 400 libraries across the U.S.
Really? And still, good, that's good. And called again?
Discovering the History of Your House and Your Neighborhood. It's published by Santa Monica Press.
Santa Monica Press. Oh, I know Santa. I used to know somebody at Santa Monica Press. But now that she's in Santa Barbara, she's written a couple books. But we start with 1914. What she publishes is a wonderful book on what happened 100 years ago in Santa Barbara. She does it by month. She does it by detail. So she did the first one, 14, then she did 15, then she did 16, and today she's going to tell us all about 17. Way back when, Santa Barbara, 1917.
And the subtitle is Tales of Everyday Life in Santa Barbara 100 years ago.
Okay.
I get my information mostly from the local papers.
Really? And the libraries of the papers are go back enough so that you can get that?
Yes, unfortunately, back in 1917, for example, we had the Daily News and Independent, we had the Morning Press, and we had the Carpinteria Valley News. So I look at all of those day by day for funky stuff. I tell people I don't write about the mayor unless he slipped on a banana peel.
Yes, you do. You're right. Your stuff is lighthearted to begin with, and surprising. For instance, I have a list of items that are culled from the book. Can I ask you the whereabouts or the wonders of those?
Okay.
To begin with, cream of wheat. Cream of wheat. What did cream of wheat have to do with your book?
Cream of wheat was apparently a newish product back then. People, say in the 1800s, were starting with oats and cooking them, and people were starting to look for something easier. A gentleman in 1914 started making something that was like cream of wheat, only it had rye and oats and everything else in it. And he wasn't sure what to call it, I guess, and so he came up with the name Cream of All. Not very imaginative, but there you go.
Okay, all right. Autoped. Because the arrival of the car seems to be imminent, and the autoped is one. But go ahead, autoped.
Yeah, well, there were cars and there were motorcycles, but this was kind of like a motorized skateboard. It was about skateboard size and had a little handle and wheels and a little bitty motor.
Yeah.
And you could go along the street with this little thing called the autoped. It was only around in the 19-teens, from about 1915 to 1919. And judging from the pictures, part of the appeal was that the ladies' skirts flared up when they were on it.
All right, dancing. February, I've got dancing. What was?
Okay, we take high school dances for granted today, but back in the 19-teens, that was not the case. Most of the dances that the high schoolers had were at the recreation center on Carrillo, which is the building that we still have.
Yes.
Apparently, some people wanted to have the dances in the school, and other people thought that dancing was sinful. And the newspaper, in fact, said, "Why should people be compelled to pay for something that they think is sinful?"
And so but they were able to get it to the schools?
As far as I know, in 1917, they were still dancing in the rec center,
still dancing
not in the schools.
What a wreck. Okay, Ojai and the fires. I have to bring up, because it sounds like 100 years ago, things were almost the way things are today.
Yes, there were two very bad fires in Ojai in 1917. One was about in May or June when fire started, they're not sure how, and it took out most of the residential district of Ojai. And then in the fall, in November, there was another fire that took out most of the business district in Ojai. Fortunately, the arcade that we associate with Ojai, that did survive. So it affected a lot of people. It also affected a lot of animals. We tend to overlook how animals are affected, but one of the things that was mentioned, even down in Carpinteria, there were a lot of rats. The rats were leaving the forest fire, and somebody's cat one morning laid out like 29 rats on the lawn to show what I did for you.
Okay, now the time was the beginning of America's awareness of war, of World War I, and you, from time to time, you sort of check in to show how the city is getting along with all the young people marching away and what's happening, how it affected people in 1917. That was sort of just as everything was coming to a crescendo in a way.
Yes.
Tell me about how you feel that the wartime influence of Santa Barbara.
Well, one of the influences was what we would now call victory gardens. The U.S. government apparently was not really prepared for the war and to feed and clothe all the soldiers. So there was a huge campaign to get people to conserve food and to grow their own. So there was a big move here in Santa Barbara to turn all of the empty lots into gardens. Volunteers would take care of the gardens, or school kids would take care of the gardens. So people were urged to grow their own vegetables, and in fact, so that the government could use its vegetables, whatever, for the soldiers. There was also a huge campaign for ladies to knit scarves and sweaters for the soldiers, as well as wristlets. Now, this was wristlets. This was a new one on me until I did some research into it. And it was what soldiers wore. It was kind of like a glove without fingers. So you could still, I guess, shoot your guns or pour coffee or whatever it was they did in the trenches. But ladies were knitting those as well. And apparently, ladies were knitting on the bus, on the lines at the bank, at home. And in fact, at one point, they were asking the firefighters who were sitting in the firehouse doing nothing, waiting for a fire, maybe they should take up knitting. Yes.
Oh gosh, and then you do a period where a group of young people are leaving to go into war, and the effect it had on the town.
Yes, yeah, businesses were closing, and in some cases, young women were taking the places of young men who had left. So they were starting to have female bellhops at the Potter Hotel. And women started, because they were working in the gardens now, women started wearing pants. Pants was a huge fashion revolution in 1917. You just did not see women wearing pants.
She has a centerfold show. Well,
Yeah. The center of the book, which is different every year. Last year it was bathing suits, the bathing suit revolution. This year it's women wearing pants. Women needed to wear pants to work in the garden. Some of them were doing other jobs in businesses. And so they wore pants, but the pants were very different from today. These were not boyfriend jeans. These were all sort of loose, but cuffed at the ankles, kind of what we would call harem pants today.
Oh yes.
But they wanted to make sure that these were
billowy,
feminine pants, not guy jeans.
Not Levi's.
No.
Levi was even like Levi around there.
Levi was. Levi goes back to the gold rush days.
It does?
Yes, Levi Strauss.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. All right, okay. Bottle Imp, The Bottle Imp.
The Bottle Imp was an early movie. It was not one produced in Santa Barbara, but it was one that they did see at the theaters here. And it featured a Japanese-American male star. And there were not many ethnic stars 100 years ago. In fact, it's very famous that Charlie Chaplin, that actor, was Swedish or Swiss or something. He was not Chinese at all. But this guy was actually Japanese. And he was kind of a star. I can't say his name. It's really long.
Okay.
But he was a star back then.
Not for Flying A, but
No,
was just a star.
no,
But who
some of the
lived
other
in Santa
movies.
Barbara? I mean, what
No,
was
he didn't
do?
live in Santa Barbara, but his movie played here.
Okay. The shipping disaster that.
That is very interesting. Yes, it was.
Photograph of the
It was a foggy day foggy morning, I think, in June or something, June gloom, which we still get 100 years later. And one was a big ship, a passenger ship, about 400 feet long. The other one was a Coast Guard revenue cutter, 200-something feet long. And one of them T-boned the other in the fog at full speed, from what I can tell. And fortunately, no one was killed, but one of them sank within half an hour. Wow. The Coast Guard cutter sank. Wow. And the interesting thing is, it was only about a year ago that they found the remains of this one ship. They hadn't apparently been sure where it sank, and it was only until pretty much a year ago, in the fall of 2016, that they found the ship. I recently saw a talk at the Maritime Museum, and they sent a little submarine type thing, unmanned, a little drone submarine down that took pictures of the wreck. So they finally found it.
Oh.
And they won't say exactly where it is because they don't want people to go bother it. So.
Time. Library, the library.
This was a huge year for the library. As the year progressed, the library was progressing also. The library, the first shovelful of earth, had only been turned over in September 1916. And they cleared the area. There was a house that was there originally. They moved that around. They started digging, and believe it or not, in less than a year, that library was up, the one that we see today. It was up and ready to use. It was a little bit different from the way it is today. The sort of atrium between the library and the Faulkner Gallery was an open area. And there were chairs out there. You could sit out there and read with magazines. It was kind of pleasant. But the main building itself was pretty much the way that we see it today.
And she did. You spoke at the library, right?
Right.
You did several times, right? Or,
no, just the one. But I contributed an article about the librarian Mrs. Lynn to the library's book.
Okay. Yes, Stephen's book. Okay. And you're still, every time, I can't say every time I've been in the library, but very often when I'm in the library, I bump into you, and you're making some sort of appearance, or you're trying to find out some information. Yeah,
I do a lot of my research in the library on the microfilm machines.
Well,
and the microfilm machines are antiques. So they're,
really?
At some point in the near future, the newspapers will be digitized and available online. But for now, you have to go to the microfilm machine with the reel of microfilm. And every once in a while, a young person, maybe 18 years old, will come up behind me and say, "Excuse me, but what is that machine? What are you doing?" I have to explain, this is before computers.
Talk about
the old days.
The early days. Well, that's great. Well, I want to continue. Enemy Spy, Franz Schulenburg.
Yes, at first when I started hearing
Can you
talk
mention
about
enemy spies in a book on Santa Barbara, 1917?
At first, I thought people were making it up when they talked about, enemy spies
Trace that.
Well,
So people were talking about it? I mean, how?
well, it was either I think it was earlier in the year, they found some sticks of dynamite under a bridge in Montecito, and I thought, well, maybe, a worker left them behind and whatever, but apparently there was a German guy that claimed to be royalty or something like that, and he went to parties and schmoozed with people. He told people he was a miner, and that's why he had the dynamite that he had. And at one point, he went up to, I believe it was San Luis Obispo or Santa Cruz, and the police there were a little suspicious of him, searched his room, and he had dynamite, and he had I think he had some ammunition and some guns, and then he had sort of coded messages from a woman only known as H. And apparently he was an enemy spy out here in Santa Barbara.
Really?
Yeah.
Has anybody ever followed that story to do a story on him alone?
No, not that I know of. I think they arrested him, and that was the end of him. And I'm not even sure that was his real name. That's one of the problems researching crooks.
Okay. Oh. You're familiar with that.
Yes.
Huh? No, that's not a bad idea, though, is to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Not that she has to worry about this one. Elephants.
Elephants. Okay, elephants on the rampage, that's for sure.
Oh, elephants.
Yes. Well, maybe cars too, but
okay.
That's one of my favorite stories.
Oh, good.
It was mentioned in the paper in 1917 that we only got little circuses coming to Santa Barbara. Circuses used to come. They'd come on the train, several train loads of them. They'd put up a tent in a vacant area, and people would come and watch the circus, and they'd do, circus parades down State Street with animals and giraffes and whatever.
The Ringling Brothers type, or
well,
young,
good question you ask.
Yes,
we only got rinky-dink little circuses here, and it was mentioned in the paper in 1907 that the reason we only got these penny-ante circuses was because of the elephant stampede. So I did some research, and back in 1909, Ringling Brothers was here. They were unloading their elephants from the railroad cars.
As they would normally do.
Right. Well, don't we all know that?
Of course, yes. Yeah.
As the elephants were being unloaded, they somehow, 3 or 4 of them got loose and went running around through the neighborhoods, through people's gardens, knocking down fences. Eventually, they managed to corral the elephants. No one was hurt, but people wanted to sue Ringling Brothers because of the damage to their gardens and their property. And Ringling Brothers didn't take it very well, and they said, well, we're never coming back to Santa Barbara.
Oh.
And that was the end of that.
Oh, so that's why you never had them again. Oh.
Yeah. But who knew we had an elephant stampede in Santa Barbara?
But who knew that you would be Ringling Brothers
blacklisted?
Blacklisted,
yes.
Absolutely. Gosh, to go through life like that.
Now,
Joe Wilhurt.
Joe Wilhurt.
Joe Wilhurt? No?
No,
Okay,
sorry.
all right. Well, talk about the Potter Hotel. I just think it's one of the most romantic, for some reason, one of the most romantic words that I've seen when you talk about the past. Tell me, was it a gigantic, wonderful place?
It was.
Not that you were there.
No, it's a little bit before my time. I don't know. How about you, Fred?
I'm trying to find out.
Oh, okay. It was built about 1902. The number of rooms varies depending on who you talk to. I think it was about 400 rooms that would accommodate 700 people. It was huge. It was the hotel in Santa Barbara, and it was right on the beach. It was a fabulous location. And anybody who was anybody went there. Movie stars, other than the Flying A, like Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks were here, and that's where they stayed when they were making movies. There were all kinds of things going on there. There was a couple of years ago, I covered in one of my other books, there was a jewel robbery. Obviously, wealthy people were staying there. Somebody's jewelry was stolen, and it ended up, that one in Chicago, and it turns out the Chicago police found it and traced it to some young man from Montecito, from a well-to-do family who was involved, and it was hushed up. and no names were ever really given, but I think some rich little boy in Montecito went to bed without supper.
But what, did it go on fire? How did they?
Oh, well, it went fine.
That's probably in another book. I realize.
Well,
it's
yes,
a
we're
preview
looking
to,
at.
It's a
Okay.
preview to 2018.
All right, spoiler alert. Okay, so this is just between you and me, Fred.
I
all
won't
right?
tell a soul.
Okay. In 1921, there was a huge fire. They're not really sure if it was arson or if it just sort of happened accidentally. One of the things going on was the Potter Hotel began an era, 1902, when rich people would come out and stay for the season.
Yeah,
they would
the
be
season.
here all winter. If you were rich and you lived in Chicago or Minnesota, wouldn't you want to come to Santa Barbara for the winter?
McCormick, you know, I think of all the
Yes,
of
all the big
Chicago,
names.
Actually, the Chicagoans very much.
A lot of Chicago
Yeah.
connections. But as people started using more and more cars, they were more mobile and they didn't have to go and plant themselves somewhere for the winter. So business was kind of slowing down for the Potter. So we don't really know, and I don't want to spread a rumor, but I've heard
Yes,
some people said it was arson.
Really, and the whole thing, just went burned itself.
Yeah, it was wood.
Anybody hurt? I mean,
I don't think so. No. Yeah.
and just then poof, it's gone.
Yes, unfortunately, because it was beautiful. You see it in the background of so many pictures. So.
All right, I'm not through. Canned tuna, my favorite, my absolute favorite. What can you tell me about canned tuna?
Well,
that's
right
in the
now,
book?
everybody thinks canned tuna, you take it for granted. But back 100 years ago, people were eating used to salmon in cans and mackerel in cans, but not tuna. Tuna was just not a fish that people ate. I don't know why. And people were unfamiliar with it. And so the people who were canning tuna and wanting people to try it had to reassure them that it tastes just like chicken. And that's how Chicken of the Sea was born.
Okay. But somehow that still boggles my mind. I can't get over that one.
Well, one thing I do want to point out that I've started doing this year that I haven't been able to do in the other books
Tell
is
me.
I found out that Life magazine was around in 1917. Now, Life magazine back then was very different from the Life magazine today, if it is still around.
It is around, yes, but I know what you mean.
As we know it, it was photojournalism,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Back before 1930, it was more like New York magazine. There were sort of erudite articles and a number of cartoons, political cartoons, as New Yorker magazine has today. So what I've started doing in this book is including for each month, it's called The Last Laugh, a cartoon from Life magazine for that month. And one of my favorites is, let's see, this is March 1917. A lady is in a bookstore and she says to the bookstore owner behind the counter, "Well, I've forgotten the name of the book, but why don't you start by telling me the books that you have, and I'll stop you when you get to the one that I'm looking for."
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And so you're already working on 18. Can you differentiate now? Here you've done like 4, and when you're out spinning your stories, can you differentiate one from the one from the other?
Sometimes they all blend in together, and I can't
big...
remember what year or what month or whatever. One of my favorite stories that I will remember from this one is I've talked about the elephants. This one was a monkey story.
See, she talked
Who would
about
have thought
animals.
we had monkeys in Santa Barbara? Apparently, at least one person had monkeys as a pet. And one day, this monkey got loose and went running down De La Vina Street. And ladies freaked out. They were calling their kids inside, locking the doors, called the cops. Cops came out. They captured it with a bag of peanuts, not surprisingly. And they brought it back to the police station, and it was playing with the policeman, obviously a pet, and eventually the owner showed up and claimed the monkey. And then they found out, it was mentioned in the paper, that the monkey had been in one of the Flying A movies. Flying A was the movie studio that was here.
Star.
And so I was able to go back through an old movie magazine, and I was lucky enough to find a picture of this little monkey from the Flying A. The little monkey was about
a pygmy?
maybe this
Pygmy,
big. I don't know what it was, but it amazed me that...
And it starred in a movie?
Yes. But it amazed me that people freaked out when this little thing went running down the street. Maybe they thought it was a giant rat or something. I don't know.
You're right. That's very odd.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Where was Disney when you needed him?
I know. We also had an alligator in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
Somebody
She had to get the animals.
Yeah, somebody
Only A.
who was serving in the military or in training in Florida
Yeah.
shipped back a 2.5-foot alligator to his mother, who lived on the west side of Santa Barbara. And it was mentioned that she put it in the pond in her backyard, and it was quite a hit with the neighbors. So I don't know if it ever went walking around at night, but
I want to know what your plans are for getting out and shilling for the new 1917, the new 1917 model.
right. Well, I will be speaking at the Genealogy Society later on this month, and then I'll be speaking at a couple of other places in
You've
January.
done almost every retirement community, haven't you? You've spoken, haven't you?
Some of them, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and various ladies' clubs and men's clubs, etc. But I'd like to leave with a piece of advice for you, Fred.
Oh, she warned me that she was going to try something like this. You sure I saw? Yes. go
Okay, so Fred, you can't buy happiness, but you can buy books.
Oh.
I actually have that on a bumper sticker on my car.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You want to sell it? You want to sell? We'll sell it to Mari Curley. So you're going to do more personal appearances. The book will be available in all outlets. Certainly Chaucer's, certainly Tecolote,
Yeah.
and all other places.
Right, and also Amazon as well.
Amazon as well. And I'm sure you're thinking about another project.
Yes.
Beyond the annual. What's
Yes,
the
for
new-
next year, I hope to do a book called Animal Tales of Old Santa Barbara. True stories of creatures great and small from Santa Barbara's past. I keep running into wild animal stories, and I want to put
Yeah, I
them all
know you
together.
somehow.
Yeah.
Some of you have an affinity for
Yes,
animals.
yes.
Well, you might as well take advantage. She also did a book on the Mesa. called
Mesopedia.
Mesopedia, which is also available, right? If ever you want to know about the background of anything that happened here, she can probably remember. Thank you for coming here. I just assume that I will be seeing you again next year when we talk about
hope so.
about 1918. Oh, 1918 is going to be a big banner year.
Yes.
I can tell you that. Well, Betsy Green, always good to have you, and good luck. The best of luck to you. This
Well,
time.
thank you, Fred. It's good to be here.
Gumbo and a crawfish pie. Filet gumbo and a crawfish pie. Tastes so good to say, ooh, yeah, yeah. Hey, baby, don't you wanna go to the Cajun dance? And as I